CBS News 24/7 unscripted, news deconstructed. So we are looking live right now at the podium at the White House. The Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt will stand before reporters any minute. So we're going to start with some breaking news. Let's go live to CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, you've got some breaking news regarding 3 detainees released from Belarus, one of them an American.
Yes, Reed, good to be with you. Just a few moments ago there at the White House, the U.S. Special Envoy for Hostages, Adam Beller, was telling reporters it appears 1 American and 2 Belarusians have been released. Whether it's directly linked to the release of Mark Fogel is unclear, but it has happened. One of these 3 is a U.S. citizen who Beller said wants to remain private at this point, so they haven't released the name. The other is as he put it, well-known journalist from Radio Liberty. His name is Andrei Kuznechik. He is with Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty's Belarusian service. The third, he did not know the nationality. And he said also that there was a 4th detainee released 2 weeks ago, a woman named Anastasia, who he said is now in Texas. It was unclear if that person is a U.S. citizen. So it's all fluid. All comes in the wake of the release of Mark Fogel and now the return of a Russian who's going back, who'd faced some cryptocurrency-related crimes, and also comes as President Trump has announced just in the last hour that he had a lengthy conversation with Russian President Putin about the future of the war in Ukraine.
Well, and Ed, I want to ask about that because we saw that Truth Social post by President Trump regarding that conversation, and he did reference the war in Ukraine. What's fascinating to me is the order of communications. You're seeing President Donald Trump first having that communication with Vladimir Putin, whereas the prior administration likely would have had a communication with Mr. Zelensky of Ukraine and done it the other way around. Does that strike you as well?
The Biden White House like to say nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. In other words, let them decide it's their war. In this case, Trump appears to be going directly to Putin, the aggressor, and saying, hey, buddy, let's try to cut a deal here and end this. Also notable that the president revealing that he's had this conversation and saying that he's agreed to have their respective teams start negotiations and saying also that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will take the lead on those. That comes as his defense secretary was at a conference today on the future of the war in Ukraine, signaling U.S. troops will never be part of ongoing operations there, which is consistent with the last administration, but also suggesting Europe needs to be doing more to step up and saying that the idea that Ukraine's going to get back territory it's had before is what's prolonging this, and that they need to instead focus on negotiations with Russia to try to establish some better order and security for Ukraine by ending the hostilities. So that is a big change in tactic for American foreign policy, at least, as was channeled during the campaign would likely happen. Whether Zelensky's on board with this and supports the idea remains to be seen. But clearly the American president and the Russian leader, now having been in touch, are eager to start talks.
Well, and he also talked about the history between Russia and the United States, even going back to the World War, and saying that we had cooperation at one point and wanting to establish that. That really front-loaded what the president said on Truth Social. What do you think that is by way of narrative setting? You
mean referring to the U.S.-Russia alliance during World War II?
Yes.
Yeah, he's suggesting he'd like to get back to that. The problem, of course, is all the things that Russia has done in the years since. The espionage work, the military work, the erosion of democracy across Russia, and then, of course, parts of Europe that it has influence over, and whether the United States wants to look beyond that and try to cut a deal and find a way to get back to working with the Russians. President Trump has always campaigned on the idea that he could do that, and whether public support is there with him would have to be reassessed. But again, this is something he suggested during his campaign he could resolve quickly. We're about 20-plus days into the administration, and he hasn't yet. So whether this is the solution remains to be seen, and as you pointed out at the top, requires Ukraine to get involved and to be okay with the terms of whatever negotiations may start here. And if Trump is suggesting that he's going to be negotiating on behalf of Ukraine, that is a huge change in tactic from the U.S. perspective before the Trump administration, which was that Ukraine would have to take the lead on this. Ukraine would have to be the one reaching out to Russia, or vice versa, and the United States would merely be an observer, encouraging them to do so if that's the way Ukraine wanted to go.
So much to keep track of. We are sure, Ed O'Keefe, you will be on top of it leading up to our dinner time headlines. Thank you so much. Always great to talk to you live from Washington, D.C. So from the White House to lawmakers on Capitol Hill, a budget blueprint to move the president's agenda, and also that much talked about confirmation vote of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. So sharp words to really highlight here from former Senate Majority Leader and Republican Mitch McConnell. He voted against confirming Tulsi Gabbard. He cites what he calls Gabbard's alarming lapses in judgment. So a lot to break down there. Let's go to Nicole Killian live right now on Capitol Hill. Nicole, that is a break from McConnell, who typically is right there in the Republican ranks. What did he have to say as he drilled down on his sort of hesitation for Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, I mean, the former minority leader has certainly put some distance between himself and the president and his agenda in the past. So it's not necessarily a surprise. And he hasn't supported all of the president's nominees in this confirmation process, although he has supported the lion's share of them. So that being said, obviously, he was a no vote on Tulsi Gabbard's nomination, but certainly she's still cleared with a relative ease. And that is notable. Especially because on close votes like these, you know, there's J.D. Vance, the vice president, who is currently traveling overseas and really not in a position to break any type of tie-breaking vote if that were to be the case. So that is why this numbers game is so critical. But there were enough Republican senators who had come out ahead of this vote in support of Tulsi Gabbard's nomination, even though initially they had expressed some reservations, whether that's senators like Maine's Susan Collins, or Alaska's Lisa Murkowski, Indiana's Todd Young. All of them eventually broke for Gabbard. So even though McConnell was the defector, it really wasn't enough to prevent Gabbard from getting that confirmation vote.
Well, we know lawmakers are talking about it, so we want to talk about it as well. Elon Musk, Doge, Musk posting a lot in recent hours about alleged fraud, alleged waste, but not a lot of detail to really drill down on. If I'm a member of the American public, I can't really see specific citations there. What's the House Oversight Committee doing by way of looking at that?
Well, keep in mind the House Oversight Committee has a subcommittee, a Doge subcommittee that is led by none other than Marjorie Taylor Greene, a close Trump ally who has been in close contact not only with the president but also Elon Musk. And so in terms of this hearing, while Musk was not before members of Congress, there were other experts from various entities there to talk about ways that waste, fraud, and abuse could be eliminated from the federal government. But as we have seen with many congressional hearings, much of this was along party lines, with certainly Republicans backing some of these latest efforts that we have seen on the part of the Trump administration and Elon Musk, while Democrats took aim. Take a listen to one exchange.
That Elon Musk is sending his unqualified Doge staff to carry out this agenda across all these agencies. And in some cases, actually teenage staffers. No accountability, no experience, and problematic records. They're trying to rob you, and they're probably a minor.
So again, that was Congressman Robert Garcia channeling a little bit of Kendrick Lamar as he tried to make his point before the committee. And while it certainly was heated at times, you know, for the most part, there was general bipartisan agreement on the need to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. Democrats were simply making the point of how they feel Republicans are going about it, that they are kind of turning a blind eye to what the administration is doing, and that there are other ways to proceed. So again, this was the first of many hearings that we expect from this Doge subcommittee, but one now in the books officially.
You're good. I thought I was the only one who caught that A minor Kendrick Lamar reference, Nicole. All right, so let's talk about dollars and cents. A few hours ago, House leadership released their budget resolution, while the Senate Budget Committee, we understand, is marking up their version today. How are these plans, as you've been able to see them and know about them, different from each other?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, obviously, even though we're making reference to the budget, we're not talking about the actual budget, but rather a budget resolution, which is simply being used as a vehicle or a procedural tool to enable the president to advance his legislative agenda. So the Senate is marking up their version today with Senator Lindsey Graham at the helm. As you mentioned, House Republicans have released their version. And the main difference is, as you know, there's been a lot of discussion here on Capitol Hill as to whether or not there should be one bill or two bills. So over in the Senate, Lindsey Graham's budget resolution is really more targeted. It's really aimed at beefing up the resources on the border, since the president has been very clear about enacting his mass deportation plan. So that's where that funding is particularly aimed at going to. On the other side, you have the House Republicans who are kind of taking more of that big, beautiful bill strategy by not only encompassing border security, but also trying to extend the president's tax cuts to the tune of some $4.5 trillion. They also want to make spending cuts in excess of almost $2 trillion. And they also want to increase the debt limit, which is something the president has asked for and tried to do just late last year unsuccessfully. But they want to raise the debt limit by some $4 trillion. So putting that all in one big package is the House's approach at this time. And both House and Senate leaders insist eventually they will both be on the same page.
Ambitious, and you have to be ambitious to chase it all and be able to digest it all, with all things politics and some pop culture mixed in. Nicole Killian, always great to talk to you. You have a great day. So let's get to some exclusive CBS News reporting. So think about it this way. Despite a previous understanding that only the most violent detainees deported by President Donald Trump would go to Guantanamo Bay, and those are the administration's words, we've now confirmed a little bit of a turnabout in strategy. The Trump administration now saying they are also sending nonviolent, so-called low-risk migrant detainees to Guantanamo. We're talking about detainees who lack serious criminal records or any at all, according to two U.S. officials, and also according to internal government documents obtained by CBS. By the way, those documents also show that more low-risk migrants are expected to be transported this very day alongside high-risk detainees. So far, the Department of Homeland Security not commenting on this. We are reaching out, trying to get some answers to that. Still ahead here on CBS News 24/7, haunting audio released in the investigation into the tragic Titan submersible implosion. We'll have that when we come back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Okay, so this video to our monitors really helps us to drive home this. A new audio recording shows us those moments. Titan submersible imploded underwater. You might remember that story that we first brought you back in June of 2023. The Titan, owned by OceanGate, just imploded on its way down to the wreckage side of the Titanic. 5 people on board, all of them lost their lives. Now, take a listen to that new recording released by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You're going to hear some static, followed by a booming noise, and then more static. Listen. Haunting to think that in that moment where you hear that bass, all of the people that you see right here, all 5 people lost their lives just that fast, including OceanGate co-founder Stockton Rush. You might remember tickets on the Titan came with a $250,000 per person price tag. Look at that. Video into our monitors right now shows the shocking moment that small plane went down in New Hampshire. Amazingly, the pilot that you just saw there hit the ground, walked away with just a single cut on his face, survived. This is video out of Boston. We're going to reloop it right there. Watch the right side of your screen. The pilot, the only one on board at the time of that crash, looks like some trees sort of cushioned the crash. Nobody on the ground was injured. The pilot able to put it down before it actually hit into the side of that house. That is some great maneuvering there to save lives. And a live look at Roanoke, Virginia. Here's your headline out of that part of the country. This is where it's very cold. In fact, a winter storm warning, battering parts of the United States. In the midst of this picture, we're talking about snow and sleet and ice, a whole big mixed bag of weather. And it's not just cold to look at. It's also making driving very dangerous, very risky. In fact, you see the headline there at the bottom of your screen. 910 car crashes in Virginia since Tuesday. In fact, statewide there, the heavy wave of snowfall moved in Tuesday afternoon, and it caused a lot of road crews to just say, hey, it is so dangerous, let's just close the roads. That guy right there just got out and walked. So a warning for drivers, if you do have to get out on the roads in that part of the country, just take it slow and turn on those headlights so that the people in some of those foggy conditions can see you coming right there. You see the guy right there, headlights are on. They're doing the right thing. As CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez is about to show you, this weather is also complicating ongoing hurricane recovery efforts for so many people out of their homes in North Carolina.
Well, you've got ice and now rain impacting parts of western North Carolina, making it a much more dangerous situation for those victims of Hurricane Helene still struggling to get back on their feet. We're talking about a ½ an inch thick of ice. This is it on a branch we found on the ground, but this is what we're noticing across the community here. Trees and power lines frozen over, and the weight of all that ice is really where the danger lies. You'll see behind me an example of that. This tree crashing down under the weight of that ice, and this power line frozen over, coated in that thick layer. Earlier, Watauga County officials believe they had at least 2,000 homes without power. That is especially dangerous for so many who are still living in temporary homes and still working to get back on their feet after that devastating hurricane late last year. The power outage situation, just one of many things that we are keeping a close eye on as we listen and hear trees and branches cracking and collapsing down onto the ground. Now, unfortunately, this is not the first winter storm that North Carolina, or really the Appalachian Mountains, has faced so far this season. And the more they see, the slower that recovery goes. In fact, they already recorded nearly a foot of snow in the month of January. And sadly, the worst of it may not be over, as February is typically where they see the highest number of winter storm impacts here in North Carolina. The hope is that this storm will start to wrap up later on this evening and potentially tomorrow morning, and we'll start to see a lot of this ice start to thaw out, making it safer for people to get back on the road and back towards that recovery. Nicole Valdez, CBS News in Boone, North Carolina.
Goodness, Boone, North Carolina, frozen there. You see the trees down.
I know. We're not only dealing with ice storms over there today, we're also dealing with snow and rain mixed anywhere from Alabama, Florida, all the way up into Maine. So I'm going to dive into that right now, actually.
This is the third.
Goodbye. All right, here's what's happening for us as we head into the next couple hours. I mean, just the next 24 hours in general. We're watching these storms really develop as they move off into the east. Snow to the north, rain to the south, with severe weather and potential for tornado activity today, all the way down into Alabama and Mississippi, while the rest of us are dealing with this icy mess you see behind me. Take a look at what's happening as we head into the next 48 hours. This is storm number 3 that's sweeping throughout these communities, and we're watching it strengthen as we head into the afternoon and evening hours tonight. It's a cold mess right now for our friends near New York, all the way up into areas like Maine, while the rest of us down south are just dealing with thunderstorm activity to the left and right of us. It will track off into the east, so we are going to catch a break eventually, but in the meantime, we could see snow anywhere up to around 10 inches, especially that lake effect snow that will impact areas like upstate New York and just portions of Ohio too along that coast. Now we head all the way just behind it over into areas like Nebraska. They're still expecting to see some snow too, while the rest of us to the south could see anywhere up to around 3 inches of rain. We'll keep you updated on that. We're also expecting to see strong winds, strong storms throughout the evening hours tonight. It's a mess right now everywhere.
All right, be safe out there.
Of course.
Of course. Well, a new read on inflation today, and economists say it really shows prices jumping higher than expected. The Consumer Price Index report reveals Americans paid a little bit more for everything. We're talking about groceries and cars and gas. We're talking also about this fitting into the month of January. That's the read. So the CPI is up 3% from a year ago and up 0.5% in the month of January. Math is going to math, numbers are going to number. So let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, you always make the numbers make sense. So what's the CPI report? What does it mean for me at the grocery store when I'm trying like hell to buy eggs?
Oh gosh, aren't we all, Reed? Okay. Okay, so the CPI report, it is the Consumer Price Index, and very simply, it measures how fast prices are growing for the items that you and I interact with daily. So that would be food, rent prices, energy prices. And so really what we saw in those numbers today is what's driving the increase are those everyday necessity items, the need to have, not the nice to have. It was driven by shelter, by food, by energy. You mentioned eggs, right? That was up 15% in the last month alone, 170% versus 2019. So I think the takeaway here is inflation. We have seen it ticking back up in the last few months after it had kind of leveled out, and that it's just a tough environment. Consumers are spending more. The labor market is still in a good place. It definitely gives the Federal Reserve a lot to think about as they consider what to do at next month's meeting.
Right, and interest rates, really, that's what I want to know about, because there is such connectivity there. Looking to what President Donald Trump posted on his social media platform, he wrote, quote, interest rates should be lowered, something which should go hand in hand with upcoming tariffs. By the way, exclamation points by 3 there. He says, let's rock and roll America. So it's up to the Federal Reserve, right, to make this happen. How does he press his finger on the scale, and really can he?
So he traditionally can't. So the Federal Reserve and the White House, they're supposed to be two separate entities, and the Federal Reserve is the one setting monetary policy. Now, when it comes to price growth and inflation, policies coming from the White House, like tariffs, like drilling more for producing more energy here, those things can influence how prices fluctuate up and down, but the Federal Reserve is the one that sets interest rates. So yes, I mean, we've heard Chair Jerome Powell, he's been testifying the past couple of days, and he has said very much, those comments will not impact us. We are a separate entity.
All right, so we want to go to that. Let's listen to Representative Brad Sherman asking Powell about Trump's post on Truth Social. Let's listen.
The president's statement at 7:58 this morning, where he said interest rates should be lowered. He said it. Will that influence what the Fed actually does?
As a practice, never comment on anything the president says, but I think people can be confident that we'll continue to keep our heads down, do our work, make our decisions based on what's happening in the economy, the outlook,
and
the balance
statements
of risks.
by elected officials are not among the things that cause you to act one way or the other.
Heads down, do our work. How do you read that, Kelly?
That he's going to follow the mission of the Federal Reserve. I mean, remember, President Trump did appoint him in the first term, and he has through 2026. So we might see a little bit more of this back and forth. But if you believe Chair Jerome Powell's statements today, he will be keeping his head down and sticking to that mission at the Federal Reserve.
So let's stay in that hearing a little bit and talk about another huge talking point in the last 48 hours, and that's, of course, billionaire Elon Musk and the question of whether he would potentially have a hand in the Federal Reserve. Let's listen to what Representative Maxine Waters had to say about that question.
When Musk comes knocking at the Fed's door, are you going to let him in?
I don't have anything for you on that.
Would you like to tell us today that you won't let Doge into the Federal Reserve or have access to the systems and the data?
So I don't have any, we've had no contact, and I don't really have, I have nothing for you to report today on that.
And this follows that exchange yesterday when he was asked about Elon Musk's access, and he used the words, "I don't think so." This is now day 2 where you can see clear strategy by Democrats wanting to know just how far Elon Musk can permeate into our financial systems.
Yeah, so this was interesting, and I actually did a little bit of research on that because that one stuck out to me too. I think that Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell can't say definitively because the Federal Reserve actually can be audited by different agencies within the government, including the Government Accountability Office, but as well as independent auditors. And so that's sort of the role that we are seeing Doge play. And given that the president did just expand Doge's power yesterday with an executive order, I think that's where you see the hesitation, where he can't say definitively yes or no, because if Doge were to play a role similar to independent auditors, that is something that they have allowed in the past.
Okay, pretty fascinating to see. Kelly O'Grady always breaking it down for us. And you know what's especially cool? When you were able to pop up right out of this floor and talk to me on this screen. I spent about an hour before the broadcast shining it up for you, Kelly O'Grady. Thank you so much. Let's hit the button. Bye, Kelly. Pretty cool. When we come back, we're going to be talking about breaking news relative to the FBI, their association outlining concerns about agents being fired. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We'll keep watching these monitors and any ones that might pop up from the floor for breaking news when we come back. Also watching this on CBS News 24/7 moments ago, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt answering the questions that you want to get answers to, including on that prisoner swap with Russia. And of course, that phone call between President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So let's go ahead and listen in to a little bit of that.
As you know, this morning, the president spoke to President Putin of Russia. They spoke at length, and the president released a statement following that conversation in great detail. I can also confirm that the president just recently got off the phone with President Zelensky of Ukraine. His truth is as follows. I just spoke to President Zelensky of Ukraine. The conversation went very well. He, like President Putin, wants to make peace. We discussed a variety of topics having to do with the war, but mostly the meeting that is being set up on Friday in Munich, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the delegation. I am hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop this ridiculous war where there has been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction. God bless the people of Russia and Ukraine. I myself just spoke to the president about these calls, and he told me to tell all of you they were very good calls, they were very positive, and the administration is wholeheartedly committed to a peace deal to end once and for all the Russia-Ukraine war.
So CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro, let's break this down, forecasting into a meeting that's about to happen with Vice President J.D. Vance. Who else is going to be in that meeting?
We know that Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be in that meeting, and generally Rubio is part of a team that Trump posted on Truth Social that will help lead these negotiations with Russia and Ukraine to end that war, including Rubio. CIA Director John Ratcliffe will be there, NSA Director Mike Waltz, and Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, who we have already seen be instrumental when it comes to the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and he had a pretty significant role in the release of Mark Fogel just last night. But according to Caroline and President Trump, he has had conversations with both leaders and really signaled, at least in his conversation with Putin, that this negotiation will get started. And I think one thing that's important to point out is some of Trump's past comments when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, such as him saying that the U.S. should receive some sort of return for the aid it has given Ukraine, and as well as Trump saying that parts of Ukraine could be annexed into Russia. I think that will really illuminate where these negotiations start. But the White House says that these conversations today with the two leaders were positive and good.
All right, Aaron, we also want to play for our viewers something that Caroline Leavitt had to say about Elon Musk's DOGE, or Department of Government Efficiency. So let's talk about that after we let our viewers hear that.
I would love for Elon Musk to come to the briefing room. That's why we had him go to the Oval Office yesterday, where I think he provided great answers. He was speaking in layman's terms, speaking common sense to all of you in the media, but also to Americans at home. But I would say especially to all of you in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to DOGE. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly transparent on what DOGE is doing. There is an X account with the DOGE handle. They are tweeting out what they are doing on a daily basis. They have a website where they are posting the receipts of the contracts that they are reviewing and the payments that they have stopped from going out the door. The secretaries of our departments have stopped from going out the door. And I would also say that before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them. And
all right, so that is what she had to say about DOGE and some of the criticisms there. Elon Musk used the term speaking to Transparency, saying that he expects, quote, a daily proctology exam. That's how layman's term that he used. But I want to ask you about what Democrats are having to say relative to when they're talking about the man who is in charge of the Federal Reserve. Is there the transparency that Elon Musk is promising to the American people? I see a lot of posts on X, but when you go to that website, you don't see the volume of things that we're told are on that website.
And that seems to be what Caroline was trying to address in part by pulling up receipts, in her words, of these contracts that have been terminated as part of Doge's efforts. But you're right. I mean, some of the transparency questions are definitely still there, just especially with all the federal employees that have been impacted. Those that CBS News have talked to have described a sense of confusion regarding what's going to happen next with their agency, looking at USAID as well as the CFPB Bureau. So certainly in that aspect, not as much transparency. And it was striking, too, when Elon Musk was in the Oval Office yesterday, as he brought up these examples, how he was kind of combining, disagreements when it comes to government waste and saying that there are, quote, fraudsters out there gaming the system for their own personal gain. Those are also things that we have not seen evidence of yet, but are asking the White House for.
How much we know about who is working with Elon Musk, the staffing, the people who are having access to these high-level records? What do we know about the people that Elon Musk has entrusted with going through all of these records that you and I, as members of the American public, could not easily access?
We know it's a mix of former Trump officials as well as a lot of younger, 20s, around that age, engineers that have had some connections to Musk's companies. We know that one of them actually had access to not only reading information in the Department of Treasury, but according to an affidavit, at one point he had access to edit that information. That permission was, revoked from him. But certainly, as his team has been working in offices and basements of these agencies, we've heard reports just from staffers that they tend to be on the younger side, but certainly people that don't necessarily have a breadth of experience working in the government and the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and I know Caroline Levitt is trying to get us to look at those receipts. That is a valid conversation to have, but how those receipts are being acquired is also an important conversation. Aaron, it's nice to talk to you today on CBS News 24/7 and all days. President Trump says he is working to end the war in Ukraine, as we just talked about. So moments ago, the president, let's get really granular, he posted this on social media. He says he talked to Russian President Vladimir Putin. He says they've agreed to work together to start negotiations immediately and will begin by calling President Zelensky of Ukraine. So according to Aaron's reporting, and talking about what Caroline Levitt just said, that call has now happened. So this post on Truth Social is a little bit dated. That call apparently has happened with President Zelensky of Ukraine. But let's all place this in time. This all comes as the Trump administration is really touting the return of a Russian detainee. We're talking about Mark Fogel. The former prisoner landed in the United States late last night. This was what the White House was able to show us with reporters right there, able to show the fruits of that release. Mr. Trump's administration negotiated that release with Russia. We don't really know a lot about the person who is Russian who was released from U.S. detention. We're trying to dig into that. Professor of International Affairs at Georgetown University, Charles Kupchan, joins us live on the stream. Charles, we're learning 3 detainees, including an American, have also been released from Belarus, but so far there's really no specification about what Belarus got in return. What do you know about that?
Well, there's a lot of different countries in play here. We've seen detainees come out of Venezuela. Israeli hostages are going home. An American returned from Russia. Now we're hearing about 3 getting released from Belarus, including 1 U.S. citizen. I think there are a couple of different things going on here. One is that people want to get on Trump's good side. They want to get off to a good start with him, have a good relationship. And the other is that Trump, unlike President Biden, is ready to talk to bad guys, right? He just got off the phone, hour-and-a-half long conversation with Vladimir Putin. The president of Belarus, Mr. Lukashenko, the U.S. really had no contact with. Now, clearly, there is a conversation taking place. So this is both about a readiness to roll up the sleeves and try to deal with tough guys like Putin. And it is also, I think, an initial effort to curry favor with the Trump White House.
Well, let's also talk about this. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. will not guarantee Ukraine's security after the war. That's a huge headline, even going so far as to say that they should not have NATO membership. So what's the argument against Ukraine joining NATO? Because in the last several months, I've stood right here on this set. We've seen the prior administration look like that's where the train was headed. Now the change.
You know, I think what's going on here is just talking some truth. And I do think it's important to tell the Ukrainians where they stand in two respects. And Hegseth did clarify the situation today. Number one, the Ukrainians are not going to win the war and take back those parts of Ukraine occupied by Russia. I think most people understand that. And two, even though NATO has said the door is open, we welcome one day Ukraine, I think for now, everybody knows it's not going to happen because you need a consensus inside NATO. The U.S. isn't on board. Germany's not on board. And I think that, you know, it's probably not helpful to mislead Ukrainians to say, hey, but folks, you're about to get into NATO. Furthermore, the Russians don't want Ukraine in NATO, in part because they don't want the world's greatest military alliance on the other side of their border. So I think what we're seeing here is simply the Trump people saying things that everybody knew, but were not willing to say in polite company.
Charles, it's always great to talk to you. I hope to get to talk to you and have more conversations breaking apart these issues here on CBS News 24/7. Tell the students there at Georgetown hello from all of us.
Will do.
When we come back, we're going to be looking at the future of FBI agents, their job security. They're concerned about it, not only about their job security, but their security in general. There's some legal maneuvering happening there that we're tracking. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. When we see it, you see it. And we have some breaking news about the fate of FBI agents in our country. So we just got this. In a letter to lawmakers, the head of the FBI Association outlined some pretty grave concerns that as many as 1,000 FBI agents still in a probationary period face being fired, or at least are at risk of being fired. This comes after the Trump administration asked the FBI to hand over the names of staffers still on probation and list anyone within the agency for less than 2 years. So in recent weeks, the White House has led an effort to downsize the federal government. And now this letter to lawmakers is saying, hey, put this on your radar because we have agents who are concerned they're going to lose their jobs. Much more to come on this story throughout this remaining days of the week. So Los Angeles County bracing for a lot of rain. Look at this. It's an area still trying to recover from those devastating wildfires that happened just weeks ago. Well, now you are seeing people prepare sandbags now. Why the sandbags? Well, this home survived, but it's in a burn scar area. And what happens is when rain comes in huge volume, there is the chance and the very real risk that these hills could start moving, potential dangerous flow, debris, mudslides. So that's why, Jess, we are seeing them put out those sandbags on the hillsides. It is just insult to injury. You also see those sandbags around some of the areas that are burned because the toxic waste that could wash down from those neighborhoods into other soils is just a huge risk.
And you're going to see just within the next 48 hours as these stories develop really how it shapes those communities and those homes that are still standing. That debris flow is dangerous. And I mean, they could see anywhere up to around 6 inches of rain down in Los Angeles from this atmospheric river. It's impacting the whole California coastline though. So I'm going to show you that on the map real fast. Anywhere from the Bay Area all the way down into Los Angeles and everywhere in between, they're dealing with heavy rain on the way. And for the next 48 hours, areas like the Bay could see anywhere up to around 4 inches, while the Sierra Tahoe region gets plenty of snow up to around 6 feet. And that storm continues to track off into the east. It's playing on a loop right now, so you can kind of see it just within the next 48 hours. Here, take a look behind me real fast. As we head into this afternoon, the storms are going to start up north, closer to California, or closer to San Francisco, I should say, just into the overnight hours tonight. And it will develop more as we head into the overnight hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. This lasts until Friday, and it's packing its punch when it comes to rain and snow widespread throughout the state. So the winter storm warnings are going to be in effect all throughout the Sierra, stretched up into areas like Redding, California. All the way down south, though, we're going to see that target rain really impact Los Angeles. Mind you, it's those communities that dealt with the fires earlier this year that haven't seen much rain since last April, since last May. And then they got that rain immediately after the fires, but this is the first time we're seeing a strong atmospheric river sweep throughout their communities, causing lots of issues when it comes to those burn scar areas. And the debris flow, like we mentioned just a second ago, that's going to be the big injury that we're going to see as we head into the coming days. So heavy rain on the way. Lots of wind, too. Wind advisories widespread throughout that California coast. We'll keep a close eye on them as that atmospheric river approaches them.
What occurs to me when we talk about this every time is if you see a first responder, no matter where you live in the country, thank a first responder. They are going to be busy once again.
They are.
All right, Jess, thank you. So when we come back, we're going to have more on what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say specifically about news that detainees have been released from Belarus. What's in it for the people of Belarus when we come back? All right, let's go back to a very snowy picture of the White House. We've been watching the words of Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt giving an update on prisoners released from Belarus, among them one American. Here's what she had to say.
I'm glad you asked. It speaks to President Trump's deal-making ability, and we can confirm the safe release of one American and two individuals from Belarus, one of whom worked for Radio Liberty. Out of respect for the privacy of these individuals, their request, we have no further details to announce on their identities, but we can confirm that one American was released today, and it's a remarkable victory on the heels of Mark Fogel returning to America last night.
Okay, so once again, we don't really have a lot of information on the identity, especially of the American who was released or the conditions under which that release happened. Caroline Leavitt citing privacy concerns, but we'll continue to ask questions and see what comes of that. Okay, so social media streaming site Twitch helping the world flip a switch to take a trip to the International Space Station. Watch.
We were lucky enough to be on orbit during a comet. It was 2024, I think Alpha 3 was the comet. And now there's another comet. So during this mission, there's been two comets that we've been able to see.
Well, that's Don Pettit, an astronaut who is floating above terra firma. And you can see right there in that window behind him, if you squint, maybe you can see yourself going to lunch today. We're kidding, of course, but it just shows you the clarity of that camera and the ability to see that first Twitch stream by NASA. We're talking about the opportunity for people to tune in, to log on, to watch spacewalks, launches, landing. It's not even a looky-loo experience. You're seeing that back and forth conversation. People were able to watch and also ask questions of the astronauts in real time while the space people orbited Earth from some 250 miles above our planet's surface. Pretty fascinating to be able to watch that. And there's also good news for the stuck Starliner crew. NASA says they're going to bring two Starliner astronauts back to Earth in March. They will reportedly come home aboard the Crew Dragon that carried Nick Hague to the station last September. So we wish everybody up there safe travels. Come on home. Let's come over here and show you something. Video to our monitors takes us to Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupting. That's what it looks like right there. It's a beautiful scientific thing to look at, but that's some pretty hot lava shooting some 300 feet into the sky at times. This volcano erupting on and off for several weeks. Kilauea, by the way, is about 200 miles southeast of the heavily populated areas of Honolulu. But the people who live there are able to get close enough to take pictures and to take video of that. Not to worry, it looks like you can get to that vantage point, get those amazing pieces of video, or you can just get it from the United States Geological Survey. We can tell you that scientists in that area, they don't really appear alarmed, but they say, as a practice, they watch those gas emissions and the impacts on air quality. That's the video. Now this is the live image there. And look at that. We say this often on this broadcast here on CBS News 24/7, video to our monitors. And that is the freshest video that we can offer you. That is live video right now at Kilauea's crater, and it looks like it could use an antacid. Of course, we're joking there, but pretty fascinating to see. So from the depths of a volcano to space and everywhere in between, the news continues.